Good day everyone, I'm Geraldine Sevilla and this is the continuation of the markets for the factors of production. Equilibrium in the labor market. Two facts about how wages are determined in the competitive labor markets. The wage adjusts to balance the supply and demand for labor, and the wage equals the value of the marginal product of labor. In this figure, equilibrium in a labor market, like all the prices, the price of labor or the wage depends on the supply and demand. Because the demand curve reflects the value of the marginal product of labor, in equilibrium workers receive the value of their marginal contribution to the production of goods and services. Any event that changes the supply or demand for labor must change the equilibrium wage and the value of marginal product by the same amount because this must be always equal. Shift in labor supply. In this figure, when labor supply increases from S1 to S2, perhaps because of an immigration wave of new workers, the equilibrium wage falls from W1 to W2. At this lower wage, firms hire more labor, so employment rises from L1 to L2. The change in the wage reflects a change in the value of marginal product of labor. With more workers, the added output from an extra worker is smaller. Shift in labor demand. In this figure, when labor demand increases from D1 to D2, perhaps because of an increase in the price of the firm's output, the equilibrium wage rises from W1 to W2 and employment rises from L1 to L2. The change in the wage reflects a change in the value of marginal product of labor. With higher output price, the added output from an extra worker is more valuable. The other factors of production, land, and capital. We have seen how firms decide how much the labor to hire and how this decision determines workers' wages. At the same time, the firms are hiring workers, they also deciding about other inputs to production. For example, our apple producing firm might have to choose the size of its apple orchards and the number of ladders for its apple pickers. We can think of the firm's factors of production as falling into three categories: labor, land, and capital. The meaning of the term labor and land is clear, but the definition of capital is somewhat tricky. Economists use the term capital to refer to the stock of equipment and structures used for production. That is, the economist's capital represents the accumulation of good products or good produced in the past that are being used in the present to produce new goods and services. For our apple firms, the capital stock include the ladder used to climb the trees, the truck used to transport the apples, and the building used to store the apples, and even the trees themselves. Equilibrium in the markets for land and capital. What determines how much the owner of land and capital earn for their contribution to the production process? Before answering this question, we need to distinguish between two prices: the purchase price and the rental price. First, the purchase price of land or capital is the price of a person pays to own that factors of production indefinitely. while the rental price is the price a person pay to use that factors for limited period of time. It is important to keep this distinction in mind because, as we will see, these prices are determined by somewhat different economic forces. Having defined these terms, we can now apply the theory of factors demand that we develop for the labor market to the markets of land and capital. Because the wage is the rental price of labor, much of what we have learned about wage determination applies also to the rental prices of land and capital. In this figure, the rental price of land shown in panel A and the rental price of capital shown in panel B are determined by the supply and demand. Moreover, the demand for land and capital is determined just like the demand for labor. That is when our apple producing firm is deciding how much land and how many ladders to rent. It follows the same logic as when deciding how many workers to hire. Both land and capital, the firm increases the quantity hired until the value of factor's marginal product equals to the factor price. Thus, the demand curve for each factor reflects the marginal productivity for that factor. We can now explain how much income goes to labor and how much go to landowner, how much goes to the owner of capital. As long as the firm using the factors of production are competitive and profit maximizing, each factor's rental price must equal the value of marginal product for that factor. Labor, land, and capital each earn the value of the marginal contribution to the production process. Now consider the purchase price of land and capital. The rental price and the purchase price are related. Buyers are willing to pay more for a piece of land or capital if it's produce a valuable stream or of rental income. And as we have just seen, the equilibrium rental income at any point in this equals to the value of the factor's marginal product. Therefore, the equilibrium purchase price of a piece of land or capital depend on both the current value of the marginal product and the value of the marginal product expected to prevail in the future. Linkage among the factors of production. We have seen that the price paid for any factors of production, labor, land, or capital equals the value of the marginal product of that factor. The marginal product of any factor in turn depends on the quantity of that factor that available because of diminishing marginal product. A factor in abundant supply has a low marginal product and thus a low price. And the factor in scarce supply has a high marginal product and high price. As a result, when the supply of a factor falls, its equilibrium price rises. So when the supply of any factor changes, however, the effects are not limited to the market for that factors. In most situations, factors of production are usually together in a way that makes the productivity of each factors depend on the quantities of the other factors available for use in the production process. Therefore, when some event changes the supply of any one factor of production, it will typically affect not only the earnings of the factor but also the earnings of all the other factor as well. An event that changes the supply of any factor of production can alter the earnings of all the factors. The change in earning of any factor can be founded by analyzing the impact of the event on the value of the marginal product of that factor. And that's the end of my report. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something.